Good afternoon, Corporations Committee. Welcome to another exciting day. The first bill actually looks somewhat familiar. We're talking about airports and liquor licenses, but this is a Senate file and it's blue. I know. So you might get some of that deja vu feeling from 2 weeks ago talking about airports and liquor. But before we get to that, let's have Barb call the roll when she gets back to her seat. But thank you for securing the door. We don't want any stragglers.
Representative Blackburn,
Excused.
Representative Burt, Representative Clausen, Representative Duncan, Vice Chairman Ayer, Representative LeBeau, Representative McGuire,
Excused.
Representative Roscoe, Chairman Swanitzer. And I'll mark McGuire here.
You can, he just walked in. So first up, Senate File 12, Airport Restaurant Liquor Licenses. Please welcome Senator Anderson, who is not in attendance today. But I do see Representative McGuire's name is on the bill. And I wasn't sure, Representative McGuire, if you wanted to present airport restaurant. Would you? Okay.
And I have an amendment for your entertainment.
Even better.
That's as long as the bill.
All right, as that's being distributed for those watching online, we do have an amendment, proposed amendment on Senate File 12, which I believe the co-sponsor will issue at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
And I'm giving everyone a couple of minutes just to review the Senate changes that were made to Senate File 12. Welcome, Representative McGuire to Corporations. We'll give the floor to you on Senate File 12.
All right, thank you to my favorite chairman. I appreciate that very much. Mr. Chairman, so the question came about with regard to counties who have already issued a liquor license to an airport, and as was mentioned in the House during that discussion. So typically the airport licenses are used, and I'll use the airport that I'm associated with. It's used in the morning for breakfast and then in the evening because we have flights that come in the morning and the evening. And so it's a very lightly used license, and the counties would like to be able to satisfy customers who are interested in opening up establishments in the county. In our situation, it's between the airport and the city. There's an area in there where they would like to offer some more liquor licenses. So that is where the bill came about. It does not change the number of liquor licenses at airports or anything. It doesn't change the way that those entities are operated. Again, it would enable the counties to authorize more liquor licenses within the areas around the city. And if it's an appropriate time, the amendment that I have offered. So as mentioned on in the discussion on the floor of the House, again, some of the airports have liquor licenses. Apparently there is a AG opinion from the 1990s that makes things a little bit clouded and confused. So what the amendment does is it establishes those liquor licenses just exactly the same way as would be for a golf course or something else. so that the county can maintain that liquor license, and then whoever comes in as the, I'll use the term vendor, whoever's running the barn or grill, can use that liquor license. They would have their own insurance and everything. And then if they move away or go away, that liquor license would still be with the county entity, and whoever the next vendor is can come in and use the liquor license. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Any questions so far, committee? All right, not seeing any yet. Liquor Association, your closest. I do believe we have a couple people online as well. You can go ahead and admit them into the room. But first we'll hear from the WSLA. Welcome, Mr. Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. If you're wondering if you've heard me say the same thing twice in 2 weeks, you have. So I'm going to save some of the testimony that you've heard before, including some really painful anecdotal when I owned a bar stories. You know why this is a good concept and a good bill. We have two bills essentially doing the same thing in different directions. House Bill 55 and the good representative behind me is on both bills. This one goes into resort license language, which admittedly is more complicated. House Bill 55 is one sentence. This is 3 pages. I prefer to usually think simpler is better as long as I get in the same direction. So both good bill sponsors, both good bills. We only need one. And so I would recommend, honestly, we support both bills. I mean, pass this one out and we can see what happens across the way. And I can answer any question now that the good representatives amendments mirror the same changes that were already made to House Bill 55. And so 55 has already had that change about the sublease and also was included city. Thank you. And so they're the same critter. And so that would be entirely up to the committee. And with that, unless you want to hear all my bar stories again, and I'd be glad to repeat them. In fact, they might even get better with time. But I'll take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mosier, do we know the status of the track of the other bill at this moment?
Mr. Chairman,
When she says
Representative.
we, she means you.
Collectively, Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, my understanding is it might be heard tomorrow. But I don't know that for sure. But we can check with Senate corporations. I believe that's committee it was assigned to.
Okay.
And so if it does pass, then we can determine which one has the path forward.
And although you're not throwing your weight behind either one specifically, your wording was shorter is better and the other one is shorter. And you may like the House bill as much, if not better, than the Senate file. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. Simpler is better. One sentence is better than 3 pages.
Other questions, committee?
Mr. Chairman, you sure you don't want more bar stories?
Representative Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just so I'm not confused, if we pass both of these bills, 55 and this bill, we'll get one of the bills in the end. Is that correct?
Mr. Mosier, do they both hit the same section of law? Have they both passed? Is there any problem if we actually did pass both of them? They're in 2 different statutes. They correspond. Would they present difficulty if we looked?
Mr. Chairman, they're in different sections of statute, but I think it gets pretty confusing when you have 2 sections of statute addressing the same issue. So I think I speak collectively for my friends behind me that it would be much easier just to have one. And of course, the airport operators can speak to their own choice of preference, but I think simpler is better for everybody. Well, the one's clear in the back too. I have friends all over this room. It's rather unusual. I usually don't have any.
Other questions for the State Liquor Association? Representative Ayers?
I'm just curious as to how come it came about that we ended up with 2 bills. Couldn't the people have gotten together and settled on one?
Mr.
That's
Chairman,
probably not a fair question for you.
actually, Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead, if you know.
Representative Bear, that's a really good question. What happened was with House Bill 55 is they came to us in the liquor division and said, write us a bill. And then what you have here is the LSO's version. So I don't get paid by the word.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody who wants to claim being a friend of Mr. Mosier, come forward. Seeing none, apparently online. Mr. Brubaker, we'll give you the floor. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to join remotely. I'm in our nation's capital this week, so I appreciate the opportunity to join remotely. The Wyoming Airports Coalition stands in favor of this bill as well as House Bill 55. We appreciate the bringers of both pieces of legislation addressing this issue. We concur with all of the statements that Mr. Moser has stated. House Bill 55 does appear to be a slightly cleaner bill. Both bills do work for us, and we do stand in support of Representative McGuire's amendment as well. And I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for the airport operators? Seeing none, and thank you for the snacks lunch you provided last week. We appreciated that. Seeing no questions, thank you much for being here. Enjoy DC. I was going to have more public comment, Representative McGuire, just in case there are some, but you're welcome to sit at the table. Okay. Other people here to testify in the bill? Nobody.
You don't have as many friends as you think.
Apparently not. All right. No one else online? Seeing no further comment on Senate File 12, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Duncan, seconded by Roscoe, and then Representative McGuire, you can come back either way. We'll talk about your amendment here in just a second. In committee, I guess what my game plan would be is to, if this bill, we can hold in committee, but if it votes out, we'll keep it on general file, see what the other House bill is. And we won't move this bill forward because I prefer the House bill myself, as do all of you since we're the House. But it will be nice to keep it there on general file should we need it if the Senate doesn't get through all of our bills. And that's just my prerogative of how I think it's going to work. But in the meantime, Representative McGuire, you have an amendment you want to offer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would move the amendment. I don't, quite frankly, we'll just call it amendment number 1 to Senate File number 12. Same thing, what this does is it just clarifies the language, make sure that there's no confusion, allows the airports to operate as they have. Currently, there are 3 airports that are affected by this. However, hopefully, as commercial service continues to expand in the state of Wyoming, other airports will be able to offer this service to their customers. So that is the purpose of the amendment. Thank you.
Excellent. It was announced today that Cheyenne's getting 2 flights a day to Denver. So we're expanding here in my community. Second, the amendment by Duncan. Question on the amendment?
Question.
Seeing no discussion, question been called. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That amendment's passed. Back in the bill. Further discussion, comments, questions?
Question.
Seeing no further discussion from the committee, question being called. Barbie, if you'd call the roll on Senate File 12.
Representative Blackburn. Representative Burt. Representative Clausen. Representative Duncan. Vice Chairman Air. Representative LeBeau. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe. Chairman Swanitzer.
And I assume,
7 aye, 1 no.
thanks. Representative McGuire, you're carrying it on the floor should we need be, I assume. Okay, thank you much. Thank you for showing up. Good to see you, Director. Through the legislature, Brenda was formally submitted to the Senate and will hopefully be confirmed this week. Okay, hope so. All right, next up on our agenda, Local Government Liability Pool Amendment, Senate File 53, brought to us from my good Senate colleague, Senator Nethercott, who I don't see before us today, but I do see the head of the Local Government Liability Pool, who may or may not know that he's going to be presenting the bill. Even better, he's brought someone else to present on his behalf. If you feel comfortable, I know Representative Greer said he could not be here, but he will floor manage it, or I will. But if you wouldn't mind walking us through it, Mr. Racines or your guest. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanzer. I'm Tori Racinas. I'm General Counsel for the Wyoming Local Government Liability Pool. And to my left is the Executive Director of the pool, Mike Todd. Be happy to walk through the bill for the Corporations Committee. It's my first time appearing before a Corporations Committee, so thanks for having us.
So for committee members, if you don't know, Mr. Racinas did work for LSO for, I guess, 2 terms back. So good to see him again. I'm surprised in all of those years, you never got to testify or appear before us. So, and Mr. Todd, whichever one of you would like to present, just jump in at any time. But go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this bill is a relatively simple bill, but it perhaps needs a little bit of context to understand what it does and what it does not do. By way of background, the Local Government Liability Pool is a statutorily enabled joint powers board. Originally back in 1986, it was created to address the problem with obtaining insurance that local governments were having. When it was created in 1986, it was under the state supervision. That changed in 1996. And the current statute, which we are amending or attempting to amend today, came into being with local control. It's a local administration. So the current statute created the Joint Powers Board. It does a couple of things that we think are or create a gap in our ability to cover our members. And just by way of background, we have 525 local government members, everything from counties, towns, cities to the little boards and districts, scattered fire districts, irrigation districts. So we provide their liability coverage. And technically, we're not subject to the state insurance laws. That's part of our enabling act. But at any rate, local governments face liability from 2 areas. One, from the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act. And for those of you who are only vaguely familiar with the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act, it gives local governments and the state government immunity from most tort actions, but waives immunity for several actions, like most commonly vehicular accidents. And I think you also addressed this session, liability of healthcare providers. And that's one area that we will address. So our Enabling Act creates a maximum payment that LGLP can pay per occurrence. And that's $500,000. And that makes sense in almost every instance because there's a $500,000 cap on the Governmental Claims Act. The exception under the Governmental Claims Act, of course, is for healthcare provider negligence, soon to be medical malpractice negligence. And that is a $1 million cap. So there is a $500,000 gap in our ability to cover our local governments who have healthcare provider employees. So that's one aspect where our members have face a liability that under 202E we cannot cover. The second is under federal law, and federal law, unlike state law, has no cap to liability. And most commonly under 1983 civil rights actions, but there's also Title VII actions, employment type actions, discrimination type actions. And there's no cap. So our local governments could face theoretically a lot more than $500,000 in liability. So we're asking the legislature to amend that in two ways. Number one, specifically recognize the $1 million cap under the Governmental Claims Act for medical malpractice. All right, more correctly, right at the moment, healthcare provider negligence. And two, to address the federal claims. On page 2, lines 15 and 16, we make E applicable to claims under the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act only. And again, that's repeated on page 3, lines 6 and 7. So two things I want to make clear that this does not do. This does not eliminate LGLP's ability to cover federal claims. And it does not affect existing Governmental Claims Act caps. Relatively simple ask, I think. I don't believe that there's much controversy about it. One other thing I will note on page 2, line 10, paragraph Romanet 5, that's a holdover from the old statute that was repealed, and it should be Romanet 3. Paragraph Romanet 5 actually doesn't exist in this act. So that's essentially the bill, overview of the bill. Happy to answer any questions.
So maybe a general question. Do all states have the same cap under their governmental claims of the 500,000 or the $1 million we already have in 139, 110 that looks like we've had since 30 or 40 years now?
I can't tell you what all states have. It varies dramatically from state to state. Some states, I believe, have lower caps. Some states, I think, have higher caps.
But no one's been banging down your door asking us to raise the caps, or actually banging down our door asking us to raise the caps either. So as for the time being, those are okay in place, the 500,000 and the $1 million for healthcare claims. I guess I'm just asking if there's been any conversation, concerns brought to you on if it's time to raise those numbers.
You know, there's, I think, always conversations about that and debate back and forth. I recall when I was still in the tort litigation division and handling these types of claims, probably eight years ago or so, there was a bill and a movement to raise those caps that didn't really go anywhere. You know, and that's a conversation about, you know, governmental liability. These are public dollars. On the other hand, you know, injured parties and putting them into wholeness. And there's all kinds of economic questions in there. And I'm sure that there are maybe even some people, yes, in the room that would be interested in raising the caps. But for the purpose of this bill, I don't think that this bill addresses that at all. And I think that the bill allows the flexibility if the legislature decided to alter the caps down the road. It wouldn't affect that one way or another.
I'm just saying you open the statute and it's in the catch title, and I'm wondering if that's why certain people are behind you or not. So I was preface. Yeah, I do have a question though. We have another bill in judiciary, this on the healthcare. Trying to remember what we did in the interim, but we had another interim committee judiciary bill in the same regard when it came to liability of healthcare providers and medical malpractice, changing those statutes over. Does that have any interplay with this as far as you know?
It really, the two bills are completely independent. What that bill that you're referring to would do is limit the healthcare provider negligence, which has $1 million cap, to only medical malpractice. There was a court case last year that decided that it was any negligence by a healthcare provider. So theoretically, a nurse gets in a car wreck in the course of her duties, it's $1 million cap versus the normal $250, $500.
Other questions? Mr. Todd, anything, thoughts on the bill you want to share?
Mr. Chairman, just that our membership, it would clarify and solidify our coverage for them. It's pretty straightforward. And one other thing would be that in the history of LGLP, I believe there's only been 4 claims that have exceeded $500,000.
All right, further questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. We'll wait to see if anybody else has public comment, then call you back up if they do. With that, is there other public comment on Senate File 53? Department of Insurance, not really your thing. You're just here to watch. They're just here to our inbox, sandbox. All right, no one online for this one. Well, seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on Senate File 53? Moved by McGuire, seconded by Air. Any amendments, committee? Discussion? No one wants to lift the caps? That was such a fun conversation 4 terms ago. All right, Representative McGuire, question, discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just make the quick comment that this whole program came about because of Wyoming's rural nature. There are smaller governmental entities, the one that I'm associated with, the airport in the center part of the state. I mean, we just wouldn't be able to. In fact, we shop every other year, we shop our coverage, and we have other coverages that are not through the government liability pool, but we shop it every year, and there's just no way that we'd be able to afford insurance in some of these smaller governmental entities. Absolutely, they have the same issue. So this is a valuable product that we have. We appreciate it. And I'd also like to compliment them. They come and provide best practice training for us. And one of the reasons that the claims are low is because they're very serious about that, and they help us to make sure that we do follow the best practices. So all in all, good program. Thank you. We appreciate it. And for a small rural state like ours, it would be very difficult to proceed or to offer the services that we do without this type of a pool. So thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none. Question being called. Barbie, would call the roll on Senate File 53.
Representative Blackburn. Representative Burt. Representative Clausen. Representative Duncan. Excuse me. Thank you. Vice Chairman Air. Representative LeBeau. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe. Chairman Zwanitzer. 8 ayes, 1 no, 1 absent, 1 excused.
All right. Well, attorneys and people with law degrees are co-sponsoring, and then Representative Oakley. So either all covered on the floor. Representative McGuire, I know, Speaker Pro Tem Greer, Representative Crago, any one of us, it's probably not a tough lift for any of us. So appreciate you coming today, Mr. Ucinas and Mr. Todd. Thanks. With that, committee, our third bill of the day is Senate File 55, Insurance Sandbox, brought to us by our Select Committee on Blockchain, FinTech, and Digital Innovation Technology. And I'm looking to see if any of those legislators decided to join us today.
And I guess it doesn't pass.
I'm guessing none of the 6 of you are here to present the bill to us. Well, we might take a 5-minute pause. Let me see if I can get a hold of the chairman or a member of that committee to see if they would come present the bill. You can probably give us a 5-minute pause online too. Thanks. blockchain, fintech, digital, whatever that committee is, are doing their things, and they will be happy to be here at 1:30 and present the bill. So I know that gives you 40 minutes to enjoy lunch and run any errands, and we'll meet back at 1:30. I don't know how that works in the YouTube world, just putting a message up that we'll reconvene at 1:30, or I like how you think. With that, we'll just be in recess until 1:30, and I'll find some co-sponsors.